Good morning, everybody. What a beautiful day. No trouble with the internet. I'm feeling amazingly good. It is really cold outside, like 20 something degrees, and they're saying it's going to be a really bitter cold holiday. So the temperatures will rise in a couple of days. But yeah, so we're all feeling the pressure of the cold, and then of course, I guess Mercury's in retrograde, and I kind of been feeling it too. But I haven't been feeling like tired. I've been feeling like a lot more energized. So that's a trip. So this morning, like early this morning, I was watching these biography videos about Billy the Kid. Like this is back in the 1800s, and then like Jesse James, because I never really did any studies on Billy the Kid. I never really did too much study on the Wild West. I learned it like in elementary school, but since kind of had no interest in really just learning the biographies of these people. Good morning, Jessica. So it was an interesting story about Billy the Kid. These are people. Billy the Kid is an Irish immigrant that was orphaned, and he lost his mother at an early age, and then I guess the father, he doesn't know who his father is, so I guess the person that was married to his mother abandoned him, so he was left to his own devices. He didn't have cabbage, water, and salt to balance out his insides. No, he was in a developing country called America, hey Tanya, and only knew what was right in front of him. you know Bars and gambling and stealing horses and all of that. He really didn't know how to legitimize himself, or he was just a rebel. And so, I mean, government, everything was, and so Jesse James too. But Jesse James was back like in the Civil War, and he was a Confederate, and he hated the Union, he hated the Feds. So all of these those people back then, when it was the wild wild west, or when the country was in flux, it was, chaos. People didn't know, they were just trying to survive. The government was just establishing infrastructure. Yeah, people got, they got screwed over. They got land taken away from them. The poor Hispanics in New Mexico had land taken away from them. Yeah, the Indians had land taken. Yeah, it sucks. And now we're coming upon Thanksgiving and we're celebrating, the genocide of Indians, which it sucks. But guess what? You are here, not struggling to survive. Now, I may be speaking for, I shouldn't speak for everybody, but for the most part, if you're on Facebook right now, you're not struggling too hard. You have access to resources, you have access to opportunities. You can make, your own life if you want to, if you have access to, because you have to have a device in order to be on Facebook, right? So obviously you're savvy enough to get online and listen to what I'm saying. So back then they were, it was struggling times, and now we are finally at a place where we can kind of relax, because when you think about it, the 1800s, that's only a couple hundred years ago. And then even go back further, people are still trying to survive. 1800s, 1700s, like, 17 and 1600s, that was like the medieval times, and things were still like, people were still only living for so long. Hey, Ellen. And so humanity hasn't figured out, because we've been in such an influx. We've been, dealing with royalty and dealing with, marauding countries or gangs, and then you have to have castles and moats, and then people were torturing each other and doing medieval stuff to each other, which it still happens, yes, but most of us right now that are on Facebook don't see that. Okay, so if you haven't seen anything that would, like, now I'm sure like in the ghetto and the bad parts, yes, people have seen each other shot, and they've seen some pretty bad stuff. If you were born, or if you were in a domestic violence situation, you've seen some pretty horrible stuff. But in my world, I haven't seen too much violence to completely just transform me and make me this bitter person. Okay, so we were, so anyways, so we're lucky enough to be able to be, in our neighborhoods and travel and do all this stuff. And guess who we need to thank? We need to thank government for keeping the order so we can go and travel without somebody doing anything horrible to us. So we can go walk around without worrying about somebody mugging us unless you're in the wrong side of town. Okay? So, you know, I'm not particularly concerned with what happened in the past. I'm not. You know, it's going to come to a point where everybody on earth is going to be under some type of control. But that's just kind of the way it is. I mean, it's survival of the fittest. I mean, industry, people, there's going to be some sick people on this earth that are going to go and take stuff. And then there's going to be people who are still sick but not as sick are going to go and try to counter that. And you don't have to go into the whole thing, well, it's the government. No, I mean, people, you know who makes up the government? It's people. Okay? People make up the government. When I spoke with the OAG, I'm on the phone with the OAG and the Federal Trade Commission. Guess what? It wasn't some nondescript, wall of voices coming at me. They were actually people. They were people I was talking to. They have wants and needs. They have mothers and fathers and all of that. And so we have to really start looking at the government as a people. We have to appeal to their humanity. We have to understand that it's not some entity that we can't really, that we can't have access to. We do have access to it, but in what way? And then how are we doing it? So I was looking at, what was I? I was looking at this. I was writing some stuff in my paper stuff. And I send this stuff to Kevin, and then he, will figure, I'm going to rewrite it and put in some stuff, and then Kevin will figure out, how he wants to rewrite it or whatever. So I'm writing all these notes and stuff, and I was looking at the sodium recommendations from the government, and the government is no different than academia. Okay, academics are different than the government. There are people that have done research based upon expectation, based upon intention. Do we know the intentions? No, but we realize that humanity, like the West, really hasn't, we've come far, but we haven't been around for that long. We have, but we haven't. We can say that humans have been around for centuries and centuries. Okay, fine, whatever. But within only the last couple hundred years, 300 or 400 years, we have progressed this far. Okay, we've progressed this far. We're in 2018, okay? And we have figured out how to have the internet, have 5G, have all these modern conveniences, but yet we're still kind of young. We're still kind of discovering stuff. Maybe there's a cabal that has a specific intention that wants to enslave the human population, maybe. Maybe there's aliens on this earth that want to enslave the humans to mine for gold, maybe, but I don't have any proof of that. Maybe the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and all that. Yeah, there are people that have a lot of money, like Warren Buffett, Rockefeller, Turners, all that have a lot of money, that figured out a way to corner the market, create a monopoly, and then impose their belief system on the population. And then guess what? What they didn't realize when they created the internet is now we're all sharing information. So maybe the intention, which is not a bad thing, is to surveil the people and appeal to their addictions, which is, narcissism sometimes. Because, some of us that are on Facebook can seem like we're narcissistic because we're always doing selfies. But we're also looking at them too. So they're looking at us, we're looking at them. We want transparency from them. Well, then I guess we give them transparency from us, right? So now we have all this sharing information, but then with all this information sharing, there's also misinformation. And then there are people with nefarious intentions that want to guide perception. And that's where you have to be a really thinking person to know how to separate fact from fiction. And that's so difficult when you have so much info flying at you. So this whole thing with the sodium, right? And I was talking about, that the government recommends 2,300 milligrams of sodium. And then, and I know people do about 3,400 and more. And then they talk about, and this is what I didn't read all of this before, so I knew that they didn't say that it was dangerous in one of those little quotes that I found. But here's what they said here. So this is about 2015 to 2020 guidelines say about sodium. The problem of eating too much sodium is covered in the report. Okay, so the 2015-2020 dietary guidelines for Americans recommend that Americans consume less than 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day as part of the healthy eating pattern. All right, based on these guidelines, the vast majority of adults eat more sodium than they should, an average of more than 3,400 milligrams each day. So they don't even talk about the condition of your body. They're just making this as a blanket statement because they can't say, okay, well, it's a case-by-case basis. If you have this, because that's too difficult, right? So they have to make a blanket statement that will just take care of everybody. So they don't have to look at a case-by-case basis. So they're saying eating too much sodium puts Americans at risk for developing serious medical conditions like high blood pressure, heart disease, and stroke. So what does all this mean for you and your family? At what steps can you take to reduce sodium? So sodium, and here's more, so sodium can add up quickly. The first thing to know is that salt you use at the dinner table is not the biggest sodium contributor to the American diet. In fact, the majority of the sodium Americans consume, more than 70%, is found in processed foods and restaurant meals. Okay, the biggest majority of the sodium Americans consume, more than 70%, and I would have to agree, is found in processed foods and restaurant meals. And don't let your taste buds fool you. Foods like grains, baked goods, and meats may not taste salty, but they add up to major source of daily sodium because they are eaten so often. The majority of Americans' daily sodium intake comes from grains, meat, and other top contributors, including processed poultry, soups, and sandwiches. Depending upon your food choices, it doesn't take too much to consume more sodium than recommended. One slice of bread contains anywhere from 80 to 230 milligrams of sodium, and a slice of frozen pizza can contain between 370 to 730 milligrams. Some breakfast cereals contain 150 to 300 milligrams of sodium before milk is added. So now you have to pick this apart, and I caught this so quickly because now my brain is really working very fast. They know that Americans are not eating massive amounts of fruits and vegetables. They know that about more than 70% are eating processed foods and restaurant meals. Well, guess what? Those processed foods and restaurant meals have negative elements in them. They have mercury. They have all the different heavy metals. They have all the different heavy metals. They have other, negative elements that add up quickly. And then what it does is those negative heavy metals and the sugars too, because there's a lot of sugar in processed foods, it also feeds the candida. And then guess what? Then you saw my thesis about candida is the underlying cause of all cancer disease and chronic illness. And then the different viruses get attached and drive that cancer, because candida is cancer, and then it starts breaking you down. So sodium is an energizing force. Sodium is an energizing force. It energizes all the wrong elements that your body doesn't need. Your body doesn't need all of those excess heavy metals. Okay? So when you juxtaposition the regular American diet, which is all the bad fats, the trans fats, processed foods, the meats, and all of that, and then you add sodium to that, and then you already have an immunocompromised body with mutations that already have cardiovascular issues and nervous system issues, you already have blood pressure issues, then that sodium coupled with all those negative elements are going to energize that negative body. It's going to energize the wrong elements that's going to cause issues. But remember, the government only knows what's already going on. They're not telling you, okay, go eat processed food. They're just saying, and this is what's not being said, is that if you actually coupled, what's not being said is if you actually coupled the sodium with the probiotics and the nutrition, like in the cabbage and kale, and you ferment it and you take that in, and then you feel, the healing and all that. And they don't know this stuff. They only know what's right in front of them. They only know that there's a huge market in restaurants and processed foods. And when you couple sodium with negative elements, just like when you say sodium fluoride or sodium bicarbonate, those are both negative elements. And if you take too much of that, it throws the balance off the body. But sodium is an energizing force in of itself. What it energizes is a direct correlation to how it's going to manifest and trigger in your body. And sodium coupled with the wrong elements equals death. Because we have learned about the elemental composition of the human body. And the first 9 elements is electrolytes. And then the rest, because there's like 44 something, elements that are supposed to make up your body. And the rest are trace minerals of heavy metals. And those are negative elements. But you only need trace amounts of those. Right now, the holistic industry and the allopathic industry are recommending a whole bunch of negative heavy metals, negative elements, heavy metals to throw the upset and anesthetize your body until that which is antibiotic doesn't work anymore because you created an antibiotic resistance, which is heavy metal resistance, because the body wants to live. It doesn't want to die, so it's going to create pain and try to heal, right? So that's what the government is doing, is it's trying to say, hey, we know you're going to eat your processed foods because we can't force you. Like, we can't force you to go, and stop drinking. We can't force you to stop smoking pot. So we got to come from a different perspective and recommend, hey, if you're eating all that processed food and all of the meats and the poultries and all that stuff, and you're going to restaurants all the time and you're taking those packaged frozen foods, then yeah, that sodium that's coupled with the negative elements is going to impact you negatively. But now we're looking at jelly juice, right? We're looking at massive amounts of nutrients in the cabbage and kale. You're looking at the probiotics, which is a byproduct of the fermentation process. Lactobacillus, it's cancer's mortal enemy. Then you're looking at the salt, which is the energizing force. Then you look at the minerals, which is making up what your body needs as far as the elemental composition of the human body. You're looking at water. It is the balancing force to that salt, because there's always balancing forces. Any one specific element taken in any condensed form that's not balanced correctly is going to be detrimental no matter what. It's what these elements are balanced with is what the difference between life and death. And so they have these mortality models, which is based upon the actuarial tables. And they've done their research based upon the stubborn humans who are full of parasites and full of fungus. And so they figure, okay, well, we can't change people's minds. We can't tell them that pain is healing because nobody wants to deal with pain. And our whole perspective now in our society is to run away from pain. No matter what, relative it's in the Matrix or in jelly juice, pain is always healing. And if you are circulating in the right elements, okay, like the positive elements and everything that is part of jelly juice, then that pain is going to be short-lived, but it is healing. The reason why in the Matrix there is chronic pain is because you're not giving the body what it needs. So right now, as you're young, you don't have chronic pain, but you do have pain here and there. So guess what? You take CBD oil, which you wouldn't give to a baby. You wouldn't give baby pot, right? But you're taking CBD oil, you're taking some kind of opioid, you're taking some kind of pill, powder, supplement, or some kind of heavy metal, like a detox, like zeolite, which is nasty, like bentonite clay, like diatomaceous earth, like kombucha, like apple cider vinegar, and you're anesthetizing your body. And then you think because you disappear the pain or you silenced one of the voices of your body, which could be like, leukemia or autism, you think you're healed. No, sorry, you're not. You just silence the voice. You just anesthetize your body. No different than a pot smoker who smokes pot every day because they don't want to face the body trying to heal, because that's what pain is, the body trying to heal no matter what. But, right now, our society is so stuck on disappearing pain right now. They want the lowest hanging fruit. And guess what? The industry is is answering your calls. That's what the industry is doing. So that's what they created all these immunotherapies. And too many antibodies we've since discovered, which are natural killer T cells, natural killer cells, endorphins, natural painkiller cells. I mean, there's a billion names for antibodies, but too many antibodies does destroy a body. And we learned that because you don't mix A, B, and O blood together. But they're figuring out how to use those, opioid endorphins adrenochrome or whatever, to their advantage. And then you think because you've induced all these antibodies, and then that you're pain free, or now that you're immune to some specific type of virus, okay, that everything is great. But they're just taking and living within your very low expectations. Because there is nobody out there that is asking for pain except for people on Julie Juice. Nobody. Everybody wants to disappear pain. So then I'm thinking like, okay, and I see the people that are CBD proponents or CBD promoters, and they're like, oh, CBD. And I'm just thinking like, so would you give CBD and pot to a baby so they can then, develop their brain? And then, people don't have nothing to say about that. Why has it that we've turned to drugs to regenerate? And I've made this point a couple transmissions ago, that the body, when it needs to develop in the womb, it needs massive amounts of nutrition. And when the body degenerates, when it regresses, it's because you're malnourished and you're not absorbing enough nutrition. So somewhere in the middle, along the way of between you being born and then you possibly dying, you have messed up your system to such an extent that you're not taking in the nutrition like you did when you were a baby to help you develop. Now you can't even regenerate, because that death trajectory is now exponential because of your practices, because of your belief systems. So government isn't exactly bad. They're just trying to figure out how to deal with a very diverse population that have so many belief systems. And I'm sure if you write them all down, you'll be on your page forever, writing down every single belief system, whether it's religion, whether it's health beliefs, whether it's political beliefs, whether it's any beliefs. Now the government has to figure out how to deal with a people, the federal government, not even the state. The state still has to deal with all the different diverse belief systems. But now the federal government has to deal with all of these crazy belief systems and try to fit everybody under one. Because they can't go and say, well, this is a case-by-case basis. You came from a vegan family, and what you need to do here is do this. No, that's what you pay these professionals to then tailor some kind of independent education plan, right? Let me bring it back to education, right? To tailor it to whatever it is that you're looking for. So if you ask, I want to disappear the pain, they're going to find a way to disappear the pain. If somebody asks, hey, I want to live forever, no one ever asked that. So no, guess what? No one's come up with anything. But guess what? I want to live indefinitely. So guess what? I figured out how to do that. Not that I can prove it, but I know that if I reverse all of my PMDD and I'm watching my own, maladies disappear, and I'm watching my own brain come back from being asleep or in a fog, or I get, a few windows of like, oh, clarity, and then it shuts down again. Because that's what I had to deal with when I was dealing with PMDD. I would get these moments of clarity and moments of energy, right? And it'd be like about a week or so in the month. And then guess what? The candida and all the parasites kicked in and shut that process down. And then I'm dealing with symptoms. I'm dealing with brain fog, constipation, with irritability, hunger and cravings and all of that. I mean, it was a nightmare. I couldn't get what I wanted, but what I could get done, I was amazing at it. And I knew that I was going to be falling off the wagon anytime. What would happen if you had a consistent, amazing clarity and you didn't have to fall off the wagon once a month? Some of you don't ever experience those kind of hormonal fluctuations. And that's why you've progressed so much in the matrix. That's why you have these beautiful houses and cars and stuff, because you never had to deal with the body working against you, having you go way high and then you have to crawl back out of that hole again. It's insane. I wish I could have been that consistent, because who knows where I would have been. I loved all of those sales shows, like, Boiler Room and Glengarry and Glen Ross. I'm a freaking salesman and I loved it. So I ended up, being in the insurance industry. But that gave me a lot of data to figure out, these, what government implements, and I'm not going to assume that it was for nefarious means. I'm going to assume, just from what I've read, because they already tell you Americans are eating crappy food. And it does have sodium because sodium is what keeps people going for a certain amount of time. So sodium isn't bad. It's what it's coupled with is what's bad. So that's why we have people who are mutated, right? Who have tapped into homeostasis and they're still mutated. They still have missing organs, lungs, or whatever. Or they're carrying some kind of transplant, or they're missing teeth, they're bald and all that stuff. But what keeps them going is the fact that there is a lot of sodium in their diet, even if it is processed food that keeps them going. But it's only going to keep you going for so long. Because once the body gives out, once all those antibodies from all of those processed foods and all those nasty things that you're taking on to deal with your cancer, disease, and chronic illness, once those antibodies build up, those natural killer cells build up, then you start contracting cancer, disease, and chronic illness, right? And then guess what you're going to throw at the body? All more negative elements to build up more antibodies, and then eventually you will die. You may buy yourself a few years because you got rid of some cancer that was accelerating the death process, but you're still building up through, a slower pace antibodies that do accumulate, and you're not offsetting that because you're so afraid of the salt. I mean, how many years does a transplant patient have? Between 5 and 10 years. How many years is a person that gone into chemo or CBD? It's all relative to how far gone you are. So, so this is why, so this should put to rest anyone that's so afraid of the salt. It is what it is paired with is the major. So with chili juice, you're getting the salt coupled with nutrition and trace elements that are friendly to the elemental composition of the human body. And then you have to understand the laws of the immune system, understand what the pain is. Pain is healing. And then, I've wrote this book that talks about that cell generation at a rapid level, then, could potentially reverse the aging process, but I don't say it in so many words. It could regrow limbs and organs, right? If you have a lot of nutrition, if you tap into your immune system, and then you are able to take and absorb nutrition at a massive scale that you weren't able to do before because of your leaky gut. Yeah, Ellen. I mean, PMDD sucks. It sucks so bad. People called me lazy because I was laid up in bed for a few days. Oh, I tell you what, I endured so much ridicule from family, from friends. I had to leave the state because I got so much ridicule. People didn't understand. And it's through no fault of their own because they didn't have that autoimmune disorder, but then they had other autoimmune disorders, like lupus or fibromyalgia or something, right? But nobody makes fun of them when they have those socially acceptable diseases, but PMDD was not socially acceptable. They're like, oh, you have PMS? And what do you say to your boss when you have to go and sleep in because you're so tired you can't get up? Well, you have to consciously make yourself get up even when you don't want to. Oh, I have the flu again. I mean, I became a really good liar, okay, and a really good interviewer. So finally I had to go into business for myself because that was the only way I can make my own hours and take the downtime that I needed and then work my ass off and work 12, 15, 16-hour days during the time that I was up so I can make up for the time that I was down. I mean, I'll tell you what, I found ways to compensate for my handicap. Okay? So, and that's a sucky way. How do you progress in society when you're always in that up and down mode? It sucks. So that's why it created me to figure this out. I don't ever want to die. At least not from cancer, disease, and chronic illness. If I die in another way, I die in another way. But I mean, knock on wood. But I will never die from cancer, disease, or chronic illness or aging because aging is cellular degradation. It's too many natural killer cells accumulated. And then what happens is that when you're in pain because you have so many natural killer cells, the body is trying to heal from those too many. So your body's at war with itself. And then you're taking all this CBD oil, you CBDers, all these drug addicts are now just, they love the fact that CBD and cannabis is being, legalized. But that's another Darwin thing, you know? And I'll be cryptic. If I do want to go and help somebody drop some seeds, I'll say, hey, would you give a developing baby cannabis to help clear and develop their neural pathways? And they don't say a damn word. So why would you give an adult something that you wouldn't give to a baby? And that is really, truly how we have to position this information. If not, then we're going to be indirectly promoting drugs as a way to cope with the issues in our body, when really it's strategic nutrition is what the answer is. Yes, I have the answer. It's freaking nutrition, but that's common sense, but it's not. I get people fighting me, say, no, it's not nutrition. Nutrition is, if that were the case, well, if you can't seem to reverse your issues with all of your vegan and vegetarian stuff, it's not the vegetables that is not giving you what you need. It's you. It's your body. You take responsibility. You messed up your body through some and no fault of your own, and now you got to fix it. And here, somebody is giving you a possible way to do that. There's no money, right? But you know what? I think there's a lot of ignorance too, Ellen. We can't assume that everything is all about money. We really have to start, because look, I'm not arrested. I'm not thrown in jail. So the system is listening to me, and they already have their loopholes to deal with anyone that wants to sue them for whatever drug that was put out in the market. But that drug never claimed that it was going to 100%, cure everybody. That drug listed out the side effects. So, and I listed out all of the things that you could potentially experience during this protocol. And I'm not your doctor. Okay, so I think that there is a lot of ignorance around sodium and nutrition and around pain. We've got to get away from the standpoint that it's all a plan. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But do we have any proof? Or can we appeal and figure out, are all these people humans who have been told one thing, and maybe the Rockefellers didn't know about sodium and nutrition and lactobacillus and probiotics? Maybe somebody over there in academia who has all of these classes that are compartmentalized in their functional silos, they never got together and conjoined and said, hey. But now the cat's out of the bag. Now the cat's out of the bag. Now you can't ignore the fact that we can couple sodium and water, lactobacillus, and nutrients, and understand the role of pain, and understand what natural killer cells are. Maybe we can now take this info and apply it. And it's going to take time, because remember, people are resistant to change. That's why the government couldn't do prohibition. They couldn't sustain prohibition. They couldn't illegalize drugs, because very stubborn, sick people will get creative. Artists who are sick are so creative, and they make beautiful art. I made some great art when I was so torn up inside, 10 or 15, 20 years ago. Oh, I had some really good pieces. And they were vibrant colors. It was like, I could probably still do it today, but do I want to? No, not really, because I have other things that I'm doing. And I'm not all angsty inside, right? So I don't need to go and try to I don't know, pour my feelings into my art, because I don't have those kind of feelings anymore. So I'm not inspired. But artists and sick people are inspired to be creative. Al Capone, creative. Billy the Kid, creative. He took his angst, and then he made it to where he became this icon of rebellion against the system. So I really want to get away. I really want to get away from the conspiracy side of it. I really do. I've got to come from the standpoint that ignorance is huge in the system. Like huge. Like people know nutrition on a very superficial level, but they don't know nutrition on a massive level. and then how that will then, what that actually looks like. Because we've been asking them, hey, please disappear my pain, please disappear my pain. And the system will market something, whatever the market can stand. If you want a painkiller, they will find you a million painkillers. They already are doing that. They're taking iridium, which is another element on the periodic table, and they're saying, okay, now we have this heavy metal that's going to kill cancer. I mean, they have right now a menu of items of heavy metals that they're going to put out there in the future to deal with cancer, disease, and chronic illness, because they know that those are antibiotic, and you're going to get antibiotic resistance when you have too much of one product that everybody has done and the body has adapted to it and it doesn't work anymore. And they're getting people at an earlier age. But people are wanting all of these vaccines. So guess what? The market's going to give you what you want. When people buy something, that tells the companies they have to put out. It's about supply and demand. If we stop demanding for these products, then there won't be a supply. When you buy a vaccine, when you buy health insurance, when you buy everything that you buy is a vote for it. So right now we're pissed off at the market for providing us with these things, but not maybe so much us, but right now the majority is asking for it. So what happens if you stop buying? Guess what? It's not going to affect you. I stopped buying health insurance for a few years now. I have car insurance that has medical payments in case there was something way out of my control that I can at least get triaged, and then I'll go home and recover on my own with chili juice. So, I don't buy health insurance, which means that I'm not subject to their conditions and their terms. If I have a kid and I go and give them to the system, then I'm telling them I am buying their services. When I give a kid to the educational system, I am telling them it's okay to use your methods on my child, because I have absolved myself of the responsibility of teaching my child and relying on you to teach my child, which means that the majority in the educational system want vaccines. So they're going to have to cater to the majority. If you don't want those vaccines, or you don't want your kid taught all of this crazy history, then you keep your kid at home, find a way to manage, and you teach your kid. Teach them all the basics, so that way they can get around in the society. They're not a complete moron, but they can at least, add and subtract and open up a bank account or whatever. And then they will figure out if they want to go to college and take part in the system, or be an entrepreneur and find a need somewhere and fulfill it. So it is all about supply and demand. And right now, there's a demand for vaccines, there's a demand for painkillers, there's a demand for drugs. And right now, we are a very small group of people that don't want that demand. It's going to take time. It seriously is going to take time for us to shut down that demand. So it's, so just come from that standpoint and to understand that the government's there for a reason, because they have to deal with so many different types of people, but you have the power to stop buying the things that you don't want to circulate. Doesn't mean that it's going to make a huge difference right off the bat, but you show people in your world that you don't need the health insurance or the painkillers, that you're willing to face the pain, you're doing chili juice, and guess what? More people will look at you and be like, wow, you're beautiful. Wow, you're amazing. Wow, you changed. What are you doing? Oh, and if they choose not to face the pain, they choose not to do the chili juice, and that's fine. That's all right, but at least they have other options. It's all about giving people options, right? We don't want to not give people options. If people want to die, let them die. If people don't, then give them the information and say, hey, this is what to expect when you're on chili juice. Because I don't see myself dying from cancer, disease, and chronic illness. And I've substantiated why I don't see that happening. And why it could definitely apply to you, because you and I are no different. We're the same, except that maybe you might be white, I'm Asian. You may have different mutations, but that's about it. But we're all the same inside. And then there's the whole thing with the DNA, and the mutations that set us apart. And the race really is a construct. It really isn't based upon DNA, because, race has to do with pigmentation or lack thereof. and then all the different mutations and the things, and when you put together different mutations, then yeah, you're gonna have some kind of race or some kind. You're like, are you Asian? Are you black? I can't tell. So, yeah. So government. Oh wow, FedEx is here. Oh, hold on, I gotta get this FedEx. Hold on. My heart always beats when I see FedEx because I never know if it's from the Federal Trade Commission or the OAG or somebody. No, but my husband got a package for his CB radio truck. So, anyways, so for me, government is not a problem. For me, government deals with the people who are very sick, so that way I don't have to deal with it. Okay, and I have my own measures. Okay, I have my own measures. I don't necessarily need the police at my door 24/7, but police and government are a good backup for anyone that is out of control and sick. Okay, so and they're the ones that create the infrastructure, so I don't mind paying my taxes. Okay, I really don't care. I mean, if it's going to keep sick people off my street and taken to jail, if it's going to help deal with somebody else's children that are out of control, that way I don't have to deal with it, I'm fine with the government that I have. They're not in my business 24/7. They're not making me do anything that I don't want to do. I know when you're living on this earth, you have to pay to play, because no matter what, if you're out there off gridding, you still got to go and grow your own food and build your own shelter. So you're still putting forth energy, to get that return. So no matter what, I'm paying for these modern conveniences. So, and yeah, and there's potholes in the street, but guess what? Government takes care of that too. I don't have to deal with that. So it's like I have really now finally figured out how to achieve this balance. So the only time that person can be upset about government is because they're needing government so much. It's like with parents. When you are living at home, right? And you don't want to go out on your own, and your parents have all these rules. Don't go out after, 10, you got to come home, you have a curfew, you can't have girls over or boys over. You're all pissy, like, why should I have to apply by these rules? I'm 18 years old, I'm old enough, Well, hey, you're under somebody else's rules. You got to live by their rules. You're taking advantage of a house over your head. You don't pay any rent if they don't pay rent. You get 3 hots in a cot, no different than jail, right? So if if you don't want to be, forced to adhere to some of these rules that will apply to anyone that lives there, then go move out on your own and do your own thing. And so, yeah, I don't buy health insurance, so I don't have to worry about. So yeah, I have to pay a tax for that, but hey, you know what? Whatever. I pay the health insurance to help me, to give me money to then pay somebody over there at Mercy Hospital to take care of any triage, because I'm driving on the road and I don't see this person that comes at me. So my medical payments will take care of triage. So my insurance company gives me the money to then give to the medical people to pay them to take care of me. All right, I gotta get a sign. Shit. Hold on. Ooh, it's hot. Oh my God. So yeah, I mean, if I want to make money in this world, then I got to pay my dues. So I'm not worried about it, you know? I'm perfectly fine with it. So then now you have peace because you're not fighting against people or things anymore. You understand why it is you're paying. So it's like, so yeah, so now I'm like, oh, like whatever. So I really, so you know, these people that are totally anti-government and they're medical tourists, you know, medical tourism. I don't even understand medical tourism because these are all negative elements. When you're in the I mean, you're an anarchist. You're you know, an anti-government person, but yet you're relying on somebody else to take care of you. This is where I have a problem with some of these anti-government people because they still rely on somebody else to take care of them. They say, oh yeah, America, the health insurance is so horrible and you can go to this other country and it's better. Why even have it to begin with? Why don't you take care of yourself to begin with so you don't have to tap into medical insurance? So there's a lot of disconnects with these extreme anti-government groups that don't really get the reason why there is this type of infrastructure. Okay? You won't trigger government coming after you if you play by the rules in some way. Okay? When you sign on the dotted line for that adjustable rate mortgage, there is no, you know, guarantee that you're going to be paying your $300 a month, because if the rates go up, then guess what? Your interest goes up. Then people get all pissed off when they're getting stuff foreclosed on them because they can't afford the payments. Preventative government, I know, right? You know, so, you know, we have to take personal responsibility for whatever contracts that we enter into, whether it's government or friends or family. And then we can't get pissed when it doesn't go our way. You get into business with anybody, even a husband or a wife. You can't get mad at the outcome because, you know, if you get into business and then it doesn't work out, then there are ways to extricate yourself from that situation. But if not, then yeah, you've got to, you know, pay the piper. You got to, I don't know, man. It's like, why spend your life fighting? Why don't you find the ways? Find the ways to understand and make a life for yourself where you're not that dependent on somebody else. Because when you're independent, then there's nobody that can bug you. Right now, my husband and I, we marry each other, we depend upon each other. Yeah, we bug each other sometimes, but we're okay with that. That's part of being married. So, but if I don't want to get bothered by anybody, then I'd be single, making my own way, living with just me and a dog, and that's it. But no, I like the companionship of my husband. He has great skills and he's a great person and I love him, and he, you know, and he backs me up and I back him up and I take care of him and he takes care of me. And it's a great relationship. But I mean, if you are in a contract with a person that you're not in a good relationship for whatever reason, then first figure out why you entered into that contract to begin with, and then find a way to get out of that contract and then move on and make something of your life. So yeah, we all have to take accountability for the decisions that we made in the past, present, and in the future. And be careful who you get in your contracts with, because once you get into a contract, it's hard to get out unless you go through the proper channels. So anyways, I mean, I don't want to be lecturing all day, but yeah, I wanted to just talk about the whole thing about government. Because, you know, I mean, I didn't trigger government until I started overstepping my boundaries, until I started, you know, violating, you know, certain laws that I didn't even know. But I don't have a lawyer, right? I don't have a lawyer on retainer to advise me. So when you don't have a lawyer, then the government comes in and says, hey, you got to cease and desist. You got to say things in a different way. You can't say this, you can't say that. And then you listen and then you move on and you change the way in which you do your approach. And they were, you know, and they were really nice. They know I'm not an evil person. The OAG knows I'm not an evil person. The Federal Trade Commission knows I'm not an evil person. They just know that, I mean, I'm trying to get a point across and I just didn't know how to say it in the right way. So they advise me. It's like free, it's having free, you know, what is it? Free legal help. I mean, not optimal to do that. I mean, but if that's your only, you know, if that is your only way to do it, then it's not a horrible thing. Just be polite. You know, when the police officer says, hey, you're driving too fast, you can be like, oh, you know, you suck, policeman. Or you're like, oh, hey, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, you're right. And then they won't even do anything. But when you start saying, oh my God, why did you stop me? Why? And take on a complete defensive mode, then yeah, you trigger their, you know, all of their stuff. And that's where people get into these altercations when they really so, you know, choose your battles, guys. Choose your battles. Is some of these battles you guys are fighting worth it? Or is it really causing you a lot of, you know, disturbing your peace? We all deserve peace. Sometimes we don't even need to fight. Some of the fights that we are fighting are not really worth it. I learned to pick and choose my battles with my husband. And I also have my boundaries too. And he knows them. And he has boundaries too. And he has, you know, he picks and chooses fights as well. Some fights are worth fighting and some are just like, it's a waste of time. There are better things in life than to sit and fight over something that really, you know, what kind of outcome can you guarantee yourself? And is it hurting you or helping you? That's what it really comes down to. Okay, I'm going to go, but you guys have a great one. It was fun talking to y'all. I'm glad that Facebook is working good. So thank you, Facebook. I'm not going over to MeWe, okay, anybody? I know people don't like Facebook a lot, but you know what? Facebook has its issues, but this is where the huge audience is. If Facebook ever goes down, then yeah, I'll go to MeWe. But I don't see Facebook going down. Okay, so at this point, I'm okay with where I'm at. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.